Good morning. I'd like to share a few stories with you that might help explain my concerns about financial literacy in the United States. You see, my first wife and I lived paycheck to paycheck, meaning that we barely had enough money to pay our bills at the end of the month. In fact, we hid bills from each other that we knew we couldn't pay. That wasn't really helpful, but we also screened our telephone calls to make sure that it was not a bill collector. Yeah, we argued frequently over the money or lack of money. And unfortunately, in January 1990, we divorced. I was no stranger to financial problems, and I didn't learn anything from that experience because in May of 2012, I had to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I'd had financial problems for a long time, ever since I graduated high school in 1969. But the good news was I always had excuses. And then I turned to the internet, and I found that 78% of working adult Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and 40% don't have enough money set aside to cover an unexpected $400 expense, such as a car repair or a medical procedure. That made me feel better. I was part of the 78%. But that feeling didn't last long, because I remembered something that I read, that if you want something badly enough, you'll make it happen. And if you don't, you'll make excuses. And I was pretty good at making excuses. But for me, that was a turning point. And I promised myself that I would take control of my money and make no more excuses. I began reading book after book on personal money management, and I interviewed accountants, investors, and financial advisors. I even spoke to people who were strapped for cash and those that were financially well off. Then I set a goal that within 12 months, I would be paying 100% of my bills on time. And I would have enough money set aside in an emergency fund that I could cover 3 months of my expenses should I lose my job. I began collecting data every day on how much money I had coming in and how much money I had going out. Then on Saturday morning, I had a cup of coffee and sat down to review the data. Looking at the income was very easy. I just pulled my pay stub. I could see my gross income, my payroll deductions, and my take-home pay. Expenses were a little more difficult. I had to break them down into two parts. Essential expenses, the money I spent to support my life. And non-essential expenses, the money I spent to support my lifestyle. Then I added those up under the non-essentials. How much money did I spend dining out when I could have eaten at home? How much money did I spend on clothing that I didn't really need? And I went through the entire list until I got to coffee. And that was an eye-opener. You see, every morning on my way to work, I stopped for a coffee. $4.75 doesn't seem like much. But when you add it up at the end of the month, it's $100 a month. So my first impulse is eliminate coffee. But I really like my coffee in the morning. I ended up going online and buying K-Cups for $1.44. I cut my cost per month down to $31. My next target, television. I was spending about $200 a month for television services. And what did I watch? The news, an occasional movie, and once in a while, a sporting event. Well, I have internet in my home because I need it for my job. It's an essential expense. And I realized I can check the news online. And if I want to, I can download a movie. And if I really want to see a sporting event, I'll just hop down to the sports bar, get a hamburger and a beer for 20 bucks. I just saved another $200 a month. I continued all the way through. When I got to the essential expenses, I went after my auto insurance. I increased my deductible from $200 to $1,000, and then I grouped it with my homeowner's insurance. $75 a month savings. The next one was utilities. That took a little longer. I installed a programmable thermostat. I lowered the water temperature on my hot water heater from 140 degrees to 120 degrees. Then where I did not need bright lights, I changed the light bulbs out from 100 watts to 75 watts. And then instead of running the clothes dryer, I hung my clothes on the line. In just a short time, I figured out I had the potential to save over $4,400 a month. I did this every week, and in my 11th month, I found that I was paying 100% of my bills on time. And I had 3 months' worth of expenses covered in my emergency fund. But there were 2 surprises. The first, my lifestyle didn't change all that much. And the second, I had money left over at the end of the month. And I didn't spend that money. I started investing in my future. First, I contributed to my 401k, which actually increased my take-home pay. Then it was mutual funds and stocks, and eventually real estate. I'm happy to tell you that in May of 2019, I retired with no worries about my future financial position. I began helping a few family members and friends, and then eventually I was helping family members and friends of the family members and friends. But I was awestruck by some of the financial illiteracy that I encountered. One young man had trouble with his checkbook. We sat down, we looked at it. I could tell by looking at the checkbook that he was a prolific check writer. But his check register had 0 entries. And no, he was not using a digital app. His bank statement showed that his balance was a negative $137 and change. And he had a collection of correspondence from the banks telling him that he had written checks, but he had insufficient money, and for each occurrence he was being paid, or he was being charged $28. After trying to explain this to him twice, I knew I wasn't getting through. He had that doe in the headlights look. So I finally said, look, you bounced checks. The bank charged you $28 each time you did that. You owe the bank $137 and change. You don't have any money in your account. You cannot write checks. He sat back for a moment, then smiled, picked up the checkbook, fanned it in my face, and said, I still got checks. Another situation involved a young couple in their 30s. They had received a letter from their landlord's attorney telling them that if they did not pay their past due rent, they would be evicted. One glance at their income and their expenses, and it was clear that they were living well beyond their means. But they were adamant that they could not change their lifestyle because they had to project a positive image to their family and friends. I knew I wasn't going to win that argument, so I took a different approach. I said, if you don't pay your past due rent, you will be evicted. If you're evicted, you have no place to live, and it will have a negative impact on your credit score. The young man very angrily responded that if we are evicted, we'll move in with my parents. And the credit score is a scam that was created by the baby boomers to take advantage of future generations. Now, I was the one with the doe in the headlight look. What distresses me is that the United States is 14th in the world in terms of financial literacy. How? I mean, we have about 26,000 high schools in this country that graduate an average of 3.7 million students every year. But studies show that 84.6% of these graduates are ill-prepared to make major financial decisions, such as buying a car, renting an apartment, mortgaging a house, starting a family, or securing a student loan. Yet, only 28 states require the high schools offer a course in financial literacy. And of those, only 10 states require that the student take the course. These schools have a core curriculum. The intention is to prepare the student for the next level of education or the workforce. Subjects typically included are English literature, social studies, history, science, and math. Very seldom do you see personal finance. So Why don't we have financial literacy taught in our schools? Some point out that many of these schools are dependent upon federal funding that's derived from the number of students that graduate high school in 4 years, their performance to state standards, and their scores on college entrance exams. Financial literacy is not one of the measures. Others say that it's the parents' responsibility to teach their children to manage their money. But 49% of those living paycheck to paycheck said that they grew up in households living paycheck to paycheck, and 69% of the parents interviewed said that they were uncomfortable talking to their children about money. Still, others say we don't teach it because we don't have enough teachers qualified to teach financial literacy. And some, more cynically, say that it's because too many businesses depend upon the financial illiteracy of the masses to generate a profit. I might suggest that asking why we don't teach financial literacy is opening the door for excuses. And perhaps a better question is, how can we make financial literacy a course the student must take to graduate? United States Senator Elizabeth Warren said, "It's like anything else you want added to the curriculum. When the parents said their children needed computer literacy, the schools reacted. It's the same for basic financial literacy." So if we want financial literacy to be a course the student must pass to graduate, we must first bring the problem of financial illiteracy to the forefront of our news. And then we must take the need for financial literacy to the local school districts, boards of education, and our elected authorities. Making financial literacy a course that is required for students to graduate is one of the best things we can do for our future graduates, for our society, and for our country. Please do not accept excuses. Make it happen. Thank you.